These are conferences based on college football playoff appearances in College Football 26 Dynasty. All right, so we have two conferences that are based on college football playoff appearances. The first one is the Pac-12. These are teams that have made it in 1 year of the college football playoff, and they did not make it to the college football playoff championship game in that year. So this is Arizona State, Boise State, Cincinnati, Florida State, JMU, Michigan State, Ole Miss, Penn State, SMU, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, and Tulane. Only a couple of these teams made it in the 4-team playoff era. That was Cincinnati, Florida State, and Michigan State. The rest of them are 12-team playoff era participants. The other conference that we have is the ACC. These are teams that have made it either one or that have made it more than once or made it once and made it to the college football playoff championship game in that season. So this is Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Indiana, LSU, Miami, Michigan, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Oregon, TCU, Texas, and Washington. TCU, Miami, and LSU are the three teams that have made it once, but made it to the college football playoff championship game in that season. Only LSU is the one that won in that season. That was in 2019 in the 14 playoff. TCU, of course, made it in 2021. They ended up losing, or 2022. They ended up losing, and then Miami made it this last season, the only one that made it in the 12-team era, and they had to win 3 games to get there. The only other more custom conference that I want to talk about before we get started is Conference USA. These are teams that have moved up from the FCS to the FBS since the start of the college football playoff in 2014. So App State, Coastal Carolina, Charlotte, Delaware, Georgia Southern, Jacksonville State, Kennesaw State, Liberty, Missouri State, ODU, and Sam Houston. There are a couple of teams like Georgia State, and I think there's one or two more that moved up in 2013 that just missed this. I think maybe South Alabama is another one that moved up in 2013. And then there's JMU, who moved up in the 2022 season, and they're a part of the teams that have made the college football playoff. So that tells you about how good JMU has been. The rest of them are just kind of geographically aligned. We're not going to go through each of them, but they're geographically aligned more or less to conferences that you would kind of recognize, but a little bit different. We kind of did some changes to how they're all aligned, but we've got, pretty closely geographically aligned conferences to go along with the 3 customized conferences that we have. We're getting into baseball season, so I'm going to go with the Beavs. I'm hoping to see the Ducks and the Beavers play in Hillsborough when they come up here in a couple months at the new Hillsborough Baseball Stadium. Go Hops. But we're going to do 4 years. Like I said, we're now doing 4 years. Best team, most impressive team using our scoreboard. I'm going to try to throw in some new graphics and try to make this a little bit more condensed of a video instead of doing the hour and a half long videos. Try to keep them between 30 and 40 minutes. So we're going to cut some things down and do some more things with graphics, but make sure that you like and subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers before the end of March. We're struggling a little bit with that subscriber count, so let's get that back up and going, and let's go to the first CFP poll. All right, so similar to last time, we're going to have some teams in conferences that are going to get boosted just because of their conference, maybe not because of their record. We see that with both Oregon, Georgia, Clemson. All those teams have multiple losses but are in the top 10. Penn State is a part of our 1 appearance, as well as Texas Tech and Ole Miss. They're all kind of running things up here. USC is the first team that's not a part of a college football playoff conference. They're 8-0. They kind of have a pretty easy conference when you look at it. They had to win against UNLV, which is probably going to be one of their bigger games of the season. They also just got a big win at Notre Dame by 2, so that will be helpful. That's a non-conference game, of course, with the Battle of the Golden Shillelagh or something. Couple big games here at the end, at Utah, at Cal. Cal could sneak up into the top 25. Even at Nebraska is a pretty big game. So we'll see if they can carry it out, but they look like they should be a college football playoff team. Iowa State is also not in the college football playoff conferences. Their only loss was at Missouri in the battle for the telephone. Big game here against Arizona State. That's a one-time playoff team, so that will be interesting to see how that all turns out. We also got Georgia Tech in the top 12. Of course, not in the college football playoff conferences. South Carolina is also coming up. So we see some new teams kind of bubbling up there, even Baylor at 6-1. So that'll be kind of interesting. We're going to go through each one of the non-college football playoff conferences as we show up here, just so we can get an idea of what those conferences look like. So we'll start with the Mountain West. That's what we're in as Oregon State, and that's what USC is in. So it's kind of like a mix of the Mountain West and the Pac-12 from prior to 2024. USC, Cal, UNLV, BYU, Stanford, Utah, San Diego State, Utah State, Hawaii, UCLA, Nevada, Washington State, Fresno State, San Jose State, and Oregon State. And you could see that it's probably going to be mostly USC and BYU as we get a little further down. Maybe Utah will bubble up. Maybe Cal, they've been getting better, even though they don't have Tosh Lupoi as the coach yet, but I think that will really help them next year. And UNLV, of course, is always really good in the first season. So let's go and see what the conference championships are going to look like. 4-8 in the first year at Oregon State. That's actually not a bad season compared to what Oregon State actually did in the regular season this year. So not terrible. I think we'll keep our job for the next season. Oklahoma and Clemson are going to be in the conference championship game. 13-22 are in the conference championship game of our top conference. That is very interesting to see. Both have 3 losses. This actually might be a more wide open playoff setup than we've had before, even though it should be a lot more closed off with how we have the things kind of set up. That's interesting to see compared to the video that we did, Wednesday with the BCS setup, which is a pretty similar conference setup with the highest level teams at the top. But we're seeing a lot more struggling from the top conference in the first season. So 13 versus 22 there. We've got a top 15 or top 20 matchup in the Big 12. Colorado could very well make the playoff this year with how things are currently shaking out. Got USC in the top 5, like we talked about. It's going to be USC and BYU in the Mountain West. This is our one appearance conference, 1 versus 3, Penn State versus Texas Tech in the championship game. Iowa State did hang around. We saw them, I think, in the top 7, so they hang around in the top 10. They should be in with a win there. And then South Carolina or Georgia Tech are going to be in. So this is how the conference championships are going to set up. This is 1, 2, 3, again, assuming the top team wins, 4 with Oklahoma, 4 with South Carolina, 5 with Oklahoma. Colorado needs some help there from probably most likely Clemson if they're going to win to get in. Georgia Tech could also use some help by Clemson. So if Clemson wins, it opens a door for Colorado, Georgia Tech, even Duke in some scenarios. And we might not get an automatic qualifier from the ACC. What does the top 25 tell us? Because there has to be some ACC teams missing from the conference championship. So Texas is one of those ACC teams that's missing, and Miami. And Michigan, A&M is from the Pac-12, so that's their second-tier conference. Georgia is also missing from that. Arizona State is number 2, and they're not going to make it in. So these 3 teams are from the Pac-12. We're going to get 4 teams from the Pac-12 in the first season. We might not even get 4 from the ACC, and UNLV could very well make it in, depending on how things shake out around them. I don't think that that's going to happen. Well, they're going to have some losses ahead of them to get in. It's going to be tough for UNLV to get in, being number 12 and not being in their conference championship game. But let's see what the bracket ends up looking like. I knew this was going to be I didn't think it was actually going to be that crazy. I thought it would be pretty similar to what we had last time. But this is a pretty crazy start. Haynes King wins the Heisman with only 2,700 yards and 25 touchdowns. We don't see what he did on the ground, but that is a pretty crazy Heisman Trophy winner in the first season. I don't think I've seen Haynes King win one yet. I don't think that Georgia Tech made the CFP either. Oh, they did end up making the CFP. They ended up beating South Carolina. And UNLV snuck in too. So it was a crazy conference championship weekend as well, because Clemson got the win, Georgia Tech got the win, Duke gets in. There's only one conference champion that came from within the top 12. Texas Tech is the only conference champion that came from within the top 12. They're the conference champion in the Pac-12. Duke, Baylor, Georgia Tech, and Clemson all come from outside of the top 12. Georgia Tech was the closest at number 13 as conference champions and get in. UNLV sneaks up to number 8. We have 4 teams from our one-time college football playoff participant conference in the Pac-12. Texas and Miami and Georgia are 3 representatives and Clemson are 4 representatives from the ACC, which is our multi-time college football playoff. And then Duke, Baylor, who we don't usually see in there, Georgia Tech, we don't usually see in there. I mean, UNLV coming from the Mountain West. USC did not get in. That means that USC lost. That was the big thing. Okay, we got to go look at these conference championship games because this is a crazy conference championship game weekend. Yeah, so upset for Clemson. I don't know about this one. Upset for Baylor over Colorado, who could have snuck in. Duke got a massive win over Rutgers. Upset for BYU over USC, who then was number 5, gets jumped by multiple teams at number 10 by virtue of that loss. It was an upset for Texas Tech to get the win here as well. I believe that Penn State was number 1 in the country going into that, so they get an upset there. Upset for Nebraska over Iowa State. That was another big loss there. And then upset for Georgia Tech over South Carolina. So what, there's like 6 upsets that directly impact the college football playoff automatic qualification setup, and UNLV ends up getting in because we were questioning whether they're going to get in at that 12 spot, and they do end up getting in. Let's see how this playoff plays out. Not only do we get 4 teams from outside of the top 12 that get in by the automatic qualification, 3 of them get a win in the first round. Clemson gets the win, being the number 12 seed, the number 21 team in the country. They win by 2 touchdowns over A&M. Georgia Tech sneaks past UNLV in Allegiant Stadium. UNLV was hosting there. They will take on Texas Tech in the second round, the Tech battle in the Rose Bowl. Baylor was the one team that ended up falling short. They lose by 10 to Georgia on the road. We get Penn State and Georgia in the Cotton Bowl. Probably the only expected matchup of any of the 4 in the quarterfinal. And Duke gets past Miami by 3 to go in against Arizona State. So if we're talking about most impressive, Georgia Tech, Duke, and Arizona State are all alive in that race. Baylor also earned some points there. UNLV also earned some points there. So there is a lot of teams here that are in the most impressive race in the first season. And a lot of them got lucky that they got in anyways, doing it all on conference championship game weekend. This is a great first season for our dynasty. We got a bunch of close games, but things do basically even out in the quarterfinal. Clemson, who's the number 21 team, ends up falling short by 3 to Texas. Georgia Tech, who's on a bit of a destiny run there, falls short by 1 to Texas Tech, the number 1 team in the country. They'll move on. It's an all-Texas Bowl in the Peach Bowl. Then Georgia gets past Penn State by 13. Arizona State gets past Duke by 11. So we have all playoff teams based on our original setup, 2 from the one-time playoff, Texas Tech and Arizona State, 2 from the multiple-time playoff, Texas and Georgia, in our semifinal. Although we had a crazy setup to begin this is not that far outside of the realm, although Arizona State in the first year essentially hosting Georgia in the Fiesta Bowl is a good twist to this, but we might end up just having 2 teams from the ACC in the national championship after all the craziness. But that's not what happened. We get 1 versus 2 in the national championship, Texas Tech versus Arizona State. This is a conference matchup in our setup, being both teams in the Pac-12, the one-time playoff appearances, and it's a conference matchup in real life, 2 Big 12 teams in the national championship. Arizona State wins by 3 over Georgia. That home field advantage comes in. They say the bettors give them 3 points at home. 3 points is the win there for being in the Fiesta Bowl. Texas Tech gets the win over Texas in that Peach Bowl, even though they had to travel a little bit farther to get there. Actually, quite a bit further. I mean, Lubbock and Austin are quite a bit further apart. So they get the win 24-28. 7 points in total separate the winners and the losers in the semifinal. Let's tally some things up and see what we're looking like going into this first national championship. All right, so going into our first national championship game, on the screen, you see our top 5 in the best team race so far. We got Georgia Tech at 15 and Georgia at 15 as well. Georgia Tech did not get an additional playoff win, but they had a Heisman and a conference championship, which gets them that same 5 points that Georgia got from their additional win. Texas, our other semifinalists outside of Georgia and the 2 national championship teams, is at 17. They have those additional 2 points from the playoff bye. And then Arizona State at 22, Texas Tech at 24. Of those 5 teams, Arizona State and Georgia Tech are both in that most impressive race. One thing that we have added into our calculation for best team, and by virtue of that most impressive team, is a 5-point bonus for runners up. I felt like that was kind of a good add to make sure that we got the championship games counted. Getting to a championship game does matter for something, even if you don't end up winning. You're still getting an additional 15 points for getting to that national championship or for winning the national championship over the runner-up. So it still, I think, balances out quite a bit, because that's 3 playoff wins, or even like double playoff bye. So it's a lot to win a championship. So there's 20 points on the line total, 5 for the runner-up. Let's see who gets the first national championship. And it is Texas Tech who gets the win from the 1 seed in our first season. 1 loss during the regular season keeps them away from that perfect team bonus. 23 points in the fourth quarter from Arizona State. They came storming back, but it wasn't enough. They were down 35-6 going into the fourth quarter, and they just couldn't close up the gap. Texas Tech gets the first win. They get the 20 points, and they take a massive lead into the second season of our sim. Beavs are 0-9. We're getting fucking fucking fired this year, folks. But here's the top 25. Ole Miss was a top 3 team, I believe, last year. They ended up falling out, but they're back in. We see Tennessee up there. Texas was a semifinalist last year. USC was a big part of the crash at the end of the season with their loss in the conference championship game. They were 8-0 last year. They were number 5 going into the conference championship game. They ended up falling out because of all that. Clemson is back in the top 5. We got our defending national champion up here, Texas. Michigan was a top team last year that ended up falling out. Duke we see up here for the first time. Arizona State is back this year. They've already got 2 losses, though. They lost to A&M and they lost to Tennessee. That Tennessee loss is rough by 3 points. What do they have left on the schedule? Okay, James Madison, who's not doing well in their new conference, Tulane, Michigan State, and the Territorial Cup. Arizona State could very well get back into the playoff this season. We see LSU up there for the first time. Oregon, who struggled last year, had 3 losses by the first CFP poll. They have 2 losses already, and they've got a couple tough teams, although they have Oregon State at the end. The Civil War will give them a win, and that might not be a win for Oregon State. That might be an 0-12 season for Oregon State. We're going to relegate them back to FCS. Hawaii we see up there in the top 20. Ohio State, who really has sucked in college football 26 for a while now. I don't know what, they're still one of the highest rated teams going in. They're 5 stars, but we don't see them in the playoffs very much at all. Even the playoffs, let alone winning national championships. So that's what we've got there. We got Maryland at 9-0. Let's look at the Big Ten and just go through the teams in that conference since we haven't really heard from them too much. So it's Duke, who was in the playoffs last year. Looks like they might be back in this year. Maryland 9-0, Virginia Tech, Marshall, North Carolina, Wake Forest, East Carolina, Navy, West Virginia, Rutgers, Virginia, NC State, and Temple. Basically an ACC kind of weird combination of ACC teams, kind of the weakest of what would be in the ACC or Big East, I guess, because West Virginia and Temple are in there, Rutgers, but that's what we have geographically there. Let's go ahead and see what the conference championship games look like. Maybe we'll get as much chaos this year as we did last year. 0-12, absolutely fired in the second season. Not a great showing here for Oregon State. What is our next job? We will see. Okay, conference championship week is not going to allow us to have as much chaos as last season, but we do have some interesting teams here in the top 10. So, I mean, Ole Miss, Tennessee, that's not that interesting. We saw them 1-2, I think, when we first looked it up. USC and Hawaii facing off in the Mountain West Championship game. USC's undefeated. Can they win the conference championship game this season? And Hawaii looks to be win, lose, or draw in the playoffs in the second season. That's great. Baylor's looking to make it back in after last season. Colorado was also up there. They lost in the conference championship game last season. They will most likely need to get revenge this year to be able to get into the college football playoff. We also see Pitt up here. Probably neither of these teams are going to get in. Wisconsin, I don't think I've seen Wisconsin in the college football playoff in a long time. Texas is looking to make it back in, and Duke should be back in as well. Michigan might be able to get the upset here. Our ACC championship game is much better than last year. Last year it was 22 versus 15, I believe, going in, and 21 ended up getting in with the win. So that's a pretty interesting layout. We're going to get a lot of new teams this year. Arizona State, Texas Tech were our national championship game last season. Texas Tech will be back in again this year, being number 3. No conference championship game for them. Arizona State's going to miss out. They ended up having an additional loss at the end of the season. It was the Michigan State game on the road by 7 to a 4-8 team. They will not make it in and be able to kind of catch back up. They are in the lead currently for most impressive team, but we'll see who can catch up because there's a lot of teams in that race that'll be in the playoffs this year. Okay, USC is trying to make a comeback after an embarrassing end to last season. Almost 5,000 yards and 55 touchdowns for Maiyava. USC might be a first-round bye team depending on what happened in that conference championship game. What's the bracket look like? So we do get USC as our number 1 team, undefeated with the Heisman. They could do the full sweep of the awards this year if they can win 3 games. The first game will be against either Michigan or Colorado, who does get in. Baylor also gets in. Pitt gets in. Hawaii does not get in. Wisconsin does get in. Clemson gets in for the second straight season. Duke gets in for the second straight season. We had a couple new teams in it, but Texas, USC, Clemson, Texas Tech, these are all teams that we saw, or not USC for the first time. Texas Tech, and Clemson and Duke are all teams that we saw last season. Baylor as well was a team that we saw last season. What happened with Hawaii here? How far did they fall down? Because they should have been, they dropped to 13. How much did they lose to USC by? I guess I could have saw it from that screen, but how much did they lose to USC by that would drop them below Wisconsin, who was below them. They lost by 50. That will kick you out of the playoffs. You lose your conference championship game by 50, even if it's to the undefeated number 1 overall team, you are going to lose out on the playoff there. And Wisconsin only lost by 7 to a team that's not in the playoff. All right, let's go see what the first round looks like. We're going to take the head coaching job at Temple because I don't think that we're going to get another offer. They were 1-11 last year. Can we get 2 wins for them to improve their lot? Massive upset in Lubbock. Wisconsin with the 1-point win over the defending national champion, Texas Tech. They will move on to face off against Texas. That was a semifinal matchup last year, Texas and Texas Tech. This year, they get stopped by the 1 point that Wisconsin put on them. What happened? Texas Tech tried to come back in the fourth quarter, but they probably went, we're going to say they went for 2 here, and they didn't get it. Yeah, they went for 2 and didn't get it in the fourth quarter. They went for the win, and they lost the game to Wisconsin. Wisconsin will move on to take on Texas. Michigan got the win over Colorado, who has been pretty good so far, but all they have to show for it is essentially a college football playoff appearance. Clemson, who was their number 21 team going in, they got in as the 12th seed last year, got a win last year. They got a win again this year. Pretty consistent showing for Clemson so far. They get Tennessee in the Fiesta Bowl, and then Pitt gets an upset win over Baylor, who was in for their second straight time. Baylor has won 2 conference championships, been in the college football playoff twice, but still no college football playoff wins to show for it. We get a modern-day ACC matchup, Duke and Pitt in the Orange Bowl. USC is still alive for the clean sweep of the season. If they do that, they will by far take the lead after Texas Tech falls short in the first round and Arizona State doesn't get into the playoffs. So let's see if USC can do that in the second year. We get chalk up top and upsets at the bottom. Texas stops Wisconsin's destiny run. They win by 8. They will move on where they face off against USC in the Rose Bowl. This is a rematch of the 2005 BCS National Championship. Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, Vince Young, all matching up here. It's a different showdown here, but we've got Heisman Trophy winner Jordan Mailata. We probably still have Arch Manning at Texas. I guess we can see. Do we still have Arch Manning at Texas? We do. So we've got a big-time quarterback matchup. Even Devin Dampier is a backup I saw there at Texas, which, of course, is the stupidity of College Football 26. That's the matchup we have up top. USC still searching for the clean sweep. Clemson gets their second win, their third win of the video after they get past Tennessee by 2 in the Fiesta Bowl. They will face off against Pitt, who also won by 1 score, 3 one-score games in the second round. They get past Duke, who made it to their second straight playoff but doesn't get to the semifinal yet again. So Pitt and Clemson in the Sugar Bowl, USC and Texas. Pitt is our only team that's made it to the semifinal that had not made the college football playoff before our video. So that is one thing to point out there. The rest of actually USC as well. USC and Pitt both are not from college football playoff conferences. Clemson and Texas are both from the ACC, which is our main conference. And they had 2 teams in the semifinal last year that both lost. We'll see if they can get a team into the national championship game this year. USC keeps the dream alive. A 6-point win over Texas in the Rose Bowl gets them into the national championship game in Vegas, where they will take on Clemson, who has had a very unlikely run. Of all the teams that would be kind of running the ACC, Clemson does not seem like the one that we would have doing that. But they are probably the best team in the ACC and could be the number 1 team in the best team race after this game. Let's set it up with the top 5 for this season. 2 top 5s for you to get a clear view of things. First, the most impressive race. We have a couple teams that are kind of bunched up at the bottom there. Baylor with 14 points, basically making the playoff twice and winning their conference championship. They have been consistent, but they haven't got a playoff win yet. Georgia Tech for what they did last season. Pitt at 17 for what they did this season. Duke at 26, and Arizona State at 27. So that runner-up does add something. That's why we put it in there, because Arizona State has been better than Duke so far, getting to the national championship game, but they wouldn't have been if we didn't add that runner-up. So that's an example of why we added that. Now, the top 5 for best team overall, not just most impressive. We've got USC at 27 currently. They have a chance to earn 21 points with this win here because they've got the 20 points from the win as well as the 1 point from the perfect season. We'll maybe dial in that perfect season because it seems pretty rare for teams to get that with how we're setting up the conferences. So they could bolt to not quite the top, but they are currently tied with Arizona State. They will take the lead on Arizona State regardless of what happens here. The other team that we have in the conference or in the national championship game is Clemson with 32, Texas with 34, two-time semifinalists, but they haven't quite made it to the national championship game, and then Texas Tech at 49, our first national champion. They also made the playoff in this season. So Texas Tech will keep the crown if USC wins. Clemson will jump ahead of Texas Tech if they win. Either way, both teams will be in the top 3, or will be in the top 4 at the end of this season. Arizona State will drop down to 5. And Clemson gets the emphatic stop on USC's clean sweep season, 34-26. They get the win in Vegas. They stopped USC storming back in the fourth quarter. They went in down 31-7. They scored 19 points in the fourth quarter, but Clemson kept them at bay enough to get the win there. They get the national championship. They will take over first place in the best team race, and USC gets an additional 5 points, but that might have really hurt their overall run if they can't keep some consistency with playoff appearances going forward. We've already got 2 wins at Temple, which is an improvement on last year for them, but we need 4 to make sure we keep this job, so we'll see how that ends up going. Duke, who was the number 2 team in the playoff last year, they lost in their second round game after the bye. They're 9-0 going into the first CFP poll. They get the number 1 spot there. They have a game against Maryland, who's been pretty good in this conference so far, and then they have NC State and Rutgers at the end. So we could see an undefeated Duke going into the college football playoff. Texas Tech is back in the top 7. We have a massive matchup this week. Arizona State versus Texas Tech, hosted by Texas Tech. This is a big top 10 game, not just for our college football playoff, but for our best team and most impressive team race that we have going on here. Texas Tech has a couple tough games left with Arizona State and Penn State on the docket. Arizona State's already got a big win over Tennessee. This is their last really massive game. So if they can get the win here, we could see Arizona State getting another bye like they did in the first season. USC, who is our national runner-up, they're currently at 10. Nebraska, who's been kind of a pesky team. They have 2 conference championships that have knocked teams out of the playoff. Maybe they can get in the playoff this week. They've got a big game against Minnesota coming up, which is a rivalry game, if I'm not. It's battle for some kind of fucking jug, isn't it? And all these things are battles for jugs. It doesn't say that it's a battle for a jug, but it is a 9 versus 12 matchup there, which could go a long way in deciding the SEC, which both of those teams are in. Clemson are defending national champions at 15. We'll see if they can get back up in there. Nothing super interesting going on. Let's actually look at the SEC, since we're kind of looking into that Minnesota-Nebraska matchup. So we got Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin, who was their college football playoff representative last year, because even though they ended up losing to Nebraska in the conference championship game, they got in as the number 12 seed and won a game. Missouri, Purdue, Iowa State, Iowa, Illinois, Northwestern, Northern Illinois, Eastern Michigan, Western Michigan, and Central Michigan. If you take out like the bottom 4 or 5 teams here, this is a really interesting conference, and maybe you would include Purdue. Purdue having 5 wins is probably the most impressive thing in the video so far, and they still have Western Michigan and Central Michigan to play, so they could get even more wins at the end of the season here. But let's go ahead and see what the conference championship games look like. Maybe we'll see a rematch of Nebraska and Minnesota. We got to 3 wins, but I think we'll keep our job even though we didn't get to the goal of this year. App State is looking for their 3rd straight conference championship. They're not going to make the playoffs, I don't think, with that conference, but that is an impressive run there. Pitt's looking to get back in. USC is not going to make it back into the playoff this year. Ole Miss or Texas Tech both will make it in. Looks like Texas Tech did beat Arizona State since they're undefeated in conference. What does that mean for Arizona State? We will see. Nebraska and Wisconsin get a rematch of last year. Wisconsin could do what Nebraska did last year and keep Nebraska from getting a first round bye and not get into the playoff, but we'll see. Nebraska's looking for, I think, their 3rd straight national or conference championship in the SEC, looking to get into the playoff for the first time. Duke is looking to get the number 1 overall seed. We'll see. It kind of comes down to what happens in that USC or in that Ole Miss Texas Tech game. UNC is trying to get in for the first time. We get a Tobacco Road matchup in the our Big Ten championship game and the ACC championship game. Alabama and Ohio State, 2 teams we haven't heard from yet, are looking to get on the scoreboard for this season. What do we have in the top 25 that we don't see up here? Did Arizona State stay in the top 12? No, they fell out. Arizona State's really dropping down. Same thing happened as did last year. They had a rough loss at Texas Tech, which they only lost 2 by 7. Then they followed up with a 2-point loss to Boise State. They stumbled with a loss at Michigan State last year, which kept them out of the playoffs. That's 2 straight years where they've had a stumble at the end of the season that have kept them out. Georgia and Michigan will be back in, both for the second time, Michigan for their second straight time, and Missouri's looking to get in for their first time, as well as Louisville. Louisville has a better chance because they actually have a game to play. Missouri is kind of stuck on their own, seeing what's going to happen if they might get bumped out by virtue of Pitt or Louisville getting a win there. Let's see what the bracket ends up looking like. Amari Odom ends up winning it for Alabama. I'll be honest, I don't know who this player is. Comment below if you do know who this player is. He seems like he's a real guy. That's a normal name. It's not a CFB 26 name and not a CFB 26 model. Almost 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns, wins it for Alabama. Alabama might have gotten a first round bye if they were able to get past Ohio State in the ACC championship game. They don't. They ended up losing. So we have teams that we weren't thinking about. Missouri did end up making it in, which we were looking at. North Carolina made it in as well. Duke kept the number 2 seed, even though they lost in their conference championship game to UNC. Nebraska ended up getting the win, so they win their 3rd conference championship. They get a first round bye. Nebraska might sneak up on us here in these last couple weeks because we have a couple teams in the 20s, or at least one team in the 20s is in the top 5 right now with Arizona State, and they're not in it. USC's not in it, and they're in the 30s. Nebraska could very well make a big run here. Texas Tech gets a first round bye. They're kind of sealing up the best team race if they can get a couple wins here because they already have they're pretty close to Clemson, who didn't make the playoffs after winning the second conference championship or national championship, and Texas Tech has made it 3 straight times plus a bye now. So this is a pretty good spot for Texas Tech. This is actually their second bye. Ole Miss did get the win in that SEC or Pac-12 championship, so they get the first. They're the 13-0 team. Maybe they can get the perfect season after USC fell short last year. BYU got in for the Mountain West from the conference championship. Georgia, Texas, Michigan all back in after being in times before. Texas is in for their 3rd straight time. I think they're the only team. Texas Tech and Texas are the only 2 teams that have been for 3 straight appearances. No, Duke has as well. Yeah, no. Has Duke been in 3 straight appearances? I know that Texas and Texas Tech has. Yes, Duke is in for the 3rd straight appearance. So we have 3 teams that have been in 3 times: Texas Tech, Texas, and Duke. Ohio State, Alabama, Missouri, North Carolina, Ole Miss, all making their first appearance, as well as BYU. All right, so we do get our conference championship game rematch between Duke and North Carolina after North Carolina gets past Missouri by 7. They'll play in the Peach Bowl for a shot at the semifinal. Duke's looking for their 2nd playoff win, and this is their 2nd bye. They've made it to the quarterfinal each year so far. Can they make it to the semifinal for the first time? Nebraska will take on Texas. Texas is looking to get back to their 3rd straight semifinal. They've lost in the semifinal 2 straight times. Can they get back there? Georgia's looking to get to their 2nd semifinal with a win over Ole Miss after they beat Alabama. And Ohio State and Texas Tech are facing off. Texas Tech has made it to the semifinal and won a national championship in the first time. They lost as the 5 seed last year in the first round. This is the first time that the 5 seed has actually won. Can the 5 seed get an additional win, or will Texas Tech move on to their 2nd semifinal? Texas wallops Nebraska. They've had a pretty solid run so far. 3 conference championships. They get into the play for the first time, and they lose their first game, but they got a bye. So maybe they can kind of bubble up in that most impressive team. But Duke is trying to make a move in that most impressive team. Their 2nd bye, they get their 2nd playoff win, their 1st semifinal appearance. They'll face off against Texas, who's in for the 3rd straight time. Still very much in the crosshairs for best team in the video. Texas Tech, who is probably going to go into 1st place after their bye, loses to Ohio State by 10. Ohio State gets to their semifinal in their 1st playoff, and Georgia gets to their 2nd semifinal overall in their 2nd playoff appearance overall. So Georgia and Texas definitely can take a big step in the best team in the video race, especially Texas. Duke could put a pretty commanding lead on best most impressive team in the video if they get the national championship, and Ohio State could put themselves in contention for some kind of run in the 4th and final season if they can get a national championship here. 3 teams from our top conference make it to the semifinal: Texas, Georgia, and Ohio State. But for the 2nd season, we get a team from our non-playoff conferences in with Duke in the semifinal. This is the game we wanted, folks. This is the one that puts the most drama into the 4th season because there's going to be a big shakeup in both races regardless of who wins this game. Duke and Ohio State in the national championship championship. Ohio State gets the big win over Georgia. Texas falls short in their third straight semifinal. They won best team in the video last time. They set the standard for the 4-team scoreboard. Can they figure it out in the final season? Either way, Duke and Ohio State are going to shake things up going into the final season. We're going to run through the national championship, and then we'll put our top 5s up on the board so we can see who is set up to win in the 4th season. But let's see who wins this national championship. Number 2, Duke. Number 5, Ohio State in New Orleans for the 3rd national championship. And it's a sight we should start getting used to. Duke wins the 2027 national championship 21-14 over Ohio State. They win it in the 4th quarter. They go into the 4th quarter up 14-6. We're going to say Ohio State scored to tie it up at 14-14, and Duke scores the final touchdown of the game to get the win 21-14. They take a commanding lead in the most impressive team, and let's kind of calculate things up because they are in the running for best team after that national championship. 2 top 5s going into the final season. You see the most impressive here. We've got Baylor at 16. They have 3 conference championships and a couple playoff appearances, but no wins in the playoffs yet. Pitt has 17. They had 17 last year. No points from this year. Nebraska, who jumps up big time this year for actually making the playoff and getting a bye. They didn't get a win, but they're at 18 points. Then we've got Arizona State, our runner-up from the first season. They're at 27. And then we have Duke, who's our number 1 team in both races with 68 points. They have essentially wrapped up the most impressive race. But for the best team, we've got another top 5 for you here. Number 5 is USC at 32 points. Last year was a big year, but they couldn't wrap up the national championship. That'll hurt them in the long run as they're more than 30 points back from the leader. Texas at 49. They haven't gotten over the hump of the semifinal, but they've made 3 straight semifinals with 42 points. Now it's all national champions. Clemson, our last year's national champion, with 52 points. Texas Tech, who's made it 3 times and won the first national championship, they're at 61 points. And Duke, our current national champion, 68 points going into the final season. We've got quite a few teams that have a chance at that number 1 team going into the final season. But if Duke gets a playoff win, they basically wrap it up, regardless of who wins the national championship, unless it's Texas Tech, Clemson, or Texas. 4 and 5 at Temple, finally getting something going in this sim for our home team. And we got a couple things going on at the top here. Texas, who is definitely one of those teams in the race for best team, they're at 8-1. Notre Dame is a new face in the race. They're up there. Duke, of course, our leading team currently, USC, who's just inside that top 5. They have a chance with the perfect season, especially if they can make a run there. They're 8-0 currently. We've seen them dominating their conference so far. They get a big win over Temple earlier. They're crushing everybody on their schedule this year. Closest game was 23 points with Nevada, and they have 2 tough games at the end of the season. UCLA, who's currently undefeated, and Notre Dame, who's number 2 in the country. If they can get past those, they could be on their way to an undefeated season. Texas Tech is number 2 in our rankings right now. They're looking to make it into the playoff for the 4th straight time. North Carolina's looking to make it back in from last year. Last year's runner-up, Ohio State's up there as well. Baylor, who is one of those teams that in the most impressive team race, they're not going to catch Duke, but they could get second place pretty easily, especially if they make their second playoff this year. BYU also is floating around up there. We didn't put them on our leaderboard, but maybe I missed them because they should be pretty close with the... Well, they've only had 1 playoff appearance, so maybe not, but they could jump up this year. And then Clemson is the other team that has a chance in this top 25. They need to make a big run up at the end of this season, though, to get in the playoff. The Sun Belt is a conference that's made very little noise since the first season. Auburn's been winning it. It looks like this: Florida, Auburn, UCF, USF, FIU, Georgia Tech, UAB, South Carolina, Georgia State, South Alabama, Florida Atlantic, and Troy. The only noise it made is Georgia Tech won the Heisman in the first season, and they got a big upset over South Carolina, which got them in after that crazy conference championship weekend in the first season. Florida might have a chance to get back in from this conference in the playoff this year, but they already lost to Arizona State, who's been falling off since their first season. That kind of won things over. They got a big game against Georgia here, and Florida State left. We'll see if they can do anything with those 2 games and jump into the playoffs. We're going bowling in Philly this year. 6-6 in the final season for Temple. Pretty good improvement from our coach. We went 0-12 at Oregon State in the second season, so got it back together. App State is not in the Conference USA Championship game for the first time. They won the first 3. They're not going to be in to win it this year. Penn State's looking to get back in the playoff. Florida State as well. BYU, like we talked about, is kind of making some noise in that most impressive team race. Maybe they can get in here. We've seen the BYU-USC matchup 3 times, I think, already. So we'll see how that turns out. USC also is alive for most for best team in the video. Baylor's looking to get into the playoff for the third time and get their fourth straight Big 12 championship. We'll see. Wisconsin, 12-0, looking to go undefeated here. They very well could be one of the most impressive teams. They've kind of been fighting with Nebraska for the SEC supremacy. If they can get the win here, they'll be a bye team, and maybe they could make some noise over at least into second place. That's really what the race is for most impressive. Best team is still alive, though. Duke looking to get their third straight bye if they can get the win over Virginia Tech here in the Big Ten championship game. And Texas, very much alive. 3 straight semifinals. Can they get over the hump in the final season? That remains to be seen. The only teams that we don't see in the conference championship games that are in the best team race are Texas Tech and Clemson. Are they going to make it in? It looks like Texas Tech needs some help. They had a loss at the end of the season. They had a 1-point loss to Tulane at week 8, and then a massive loss to Penn State to keep them out of the Pac-12 championship game and potentially kick them out of the playoffs in the national game of the week. We'll see if that comes back to hurt them. Clemson's not going to make it in. Clemson's not even in the top 25, it doesn't look like. So Clemson is basically out of the race. It might come down to just Duke, Texas, and on the outside chance of USC if Texas Tech doesn't make it in. Now, Penn State could help them out here with a win over Florida State. They kind of need that because otherwise they might be looking at a rough spot there if Baylor can figure out how to get a big win over Colorado in that national championship game. So let's see what the bracket looks like in the final season. This could be big. Carly Lacey Jr. gets the Heisman for Texas. They've been getting steady points without getting a championship. This is some more steady points, an additional 3, almost 4,000 yards passing, 35 touchdowns. Will that give them over the top in the end? Temple's going to take on Clemson in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Holy shit, we're going to get absolutely trounced in that game, but good for Temple making the playoff or making a bowl game at the end. Playoffs, let's see. Texas Tech does not get in. So it's coming down to 3 teams in the byes, Texas, Duke, and USC. Duke's the number 2 team for the 3rd straight season. They'll be in the Rose Bowl. They'll get the winner of Wisconsin and BYU. Both teams that are probably fighting for second place in the most impressive race. Baylor's also fighting for second in the most impressive race. They're 13-0. They've got in 3 times. They have 4 conference championships. They're alive for the perfect season. They could make a big run here and just shoot themselves up the leaderboard, maybe even getting into the top 5 of best team. Penn State has in their second playoffs. Ole Miss and Georgia are both in their 3rd time. Notre Dame and Florida State are both in for the 1st time. Michigan's in for the 3rd time. Texas is in for the 4th time. USC's in for the 2nd time, but they got a runner-up in the 1st time. And Duke is in for the 4th time in the video. Let's see how this all shakes out. Baylor goes 0-3 in the playoffs. Impressive that they got in 3 times. Impressive that they won 4 conference championships, but they do come up short in their final opportunity to get the win. Penn State will move on, and they'll face off against USC in the Sugar Bowl. Georgia gets another win. They've been to 2 semifinals in their 2 appearances so far. Texas has been to 3 semifinals in their 3 appearances so far. Something's got to give in the quarterfinal in the Orange Bowl. Notre Dame gets a win over Florida State. Doesn't necessarily matter to any of the races. Wisconsin gets a playoff win. I believe that's their 2nd playoff win in the video so far. They got it. No. They lost. Well, we'll see. I'll double check that, but I believe that's their 2nd playoff win. They get the win over BYU, who makes it in twice, loses twice. Wisconsin and Duke in the Rose Bowl. That's an interesting Rose Bowl. We get some rivalry in the Cotton Bowl as well with Michigan and Notre Dame facing off. And Texas and Georgia might be turning into a rivalry in the SEC. Maybe even USC and Penn State is going to turn into a rivalry in the Big Ten. Temple comes up short in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, to be expected, but the bigger team that comes up short here is Texas. They don't make it to their 4th semifinal. They are out of the best team race with that 6-point loss to Georgia. Georgia will move on to take on USC, who is still alive in the best team race. It's an outside shot because Duke has now got a playoff bye and a playoff win to go along with their playoff appearance and their conference championship this season. They are 30 points ahead of USC. So USC would have to win and hope that Duke doesn't. I don't even think that's going to do it. I think Duke has wrapped it up. Now Duke is looking at best team of all time territory to take down Texas from last video. They will get a chance to pad their stats against Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl with a chance to go to the national championship game. We have got 2 teams from our top conference and 2 teams from our non-playoff conferences in the semifinal and the final season. Duke does end up coming up short against Notre Dame. I don't know if they've gotten past Texas yet for best team of all time, but USC stays alive. I think that they could probably get up to like 2, but I don't think that they could catch Duke with how well Duke has done so far. But let's set it up with a couple top 5s going into the national championship game to see what is on the line against between USC and Notre Dame, another rivalry matchup for Notre Dame. We start with a podium, and that is the most impressive team race. In number 3, we have Baylor. They found their way into the top 3 of the most impressive team race by virtue of making the playoffs in that final season. They didn't do anything in the playoffs. They made it 3 times, won 4 conference championships. That's enough to get them on the podium for most impressive team. Arizona State, with just their first season getting to the national championship, even though they lost, number 2 seed in the playoff, they are the number 2 most impressive team with 27 points. And Duke gets the most impressive team with 87 points. So they shatter Missouri's previous record from last video of 66 points for most impressive team. And keen listeners would know that they also shattered the best team record that Texas set last video with 79 points. They're the new most impressive and best team in the 4-season era of our videos. They are now the record holder for both of those. We're going to have to start discussing Duke's eligibility for most impressive team if they continue to dominate like this, video in and video out. But now you get a top 5. And this, there's still a little bit of reorganization that could happen with this national championship game. Clemson is going to finish off at number 5. They're 52 points, 1 national championship. That gets them to number 5. USC is currently number 4. They will get at least 5 points in this national championship game, but that 5 points would just tie them with Texas Tech at 61, as USC is currently at 56. They could get 20 points for winning it. That would put them at 76 points, and they would then jump current number 2, Texas, at 64. But Duke has it all wrapped up. They cannot, even if it was 30 points, USC couldn't catch up with Duke after the 87-point performance they put together in this video. Even if Duke didn't win a conference championship, didn't get a first-round bye, and didn't win a playoff, that's 12, 14 points. They would be down at 73 points, and USC still could not catch them with a win in this national championship. That's how dominant Duke was in this video. Even if they did all those things, USC would not even be able to have caught Texas. Texas would have had a chance to catch Duke in the playoffs, but they, of course, lose in their first game, so that's where it ends up. Let's see what happens in this national championship game, see if USC can get into second place. Notre Dame comes in and spoils the party for USC. One of the best seasons of the video. It won't get them into the top 5 because they're only going to get about 45 points for this season, and they hadn't scored any points prior to that. So Notre Dame gets to spoil USC's party. USC finishes off tied with Texas Tech in the top 3. But our winner of best team and most impressive team, new record setter, is Duke for the 4-year era of Bucky Barrick's videos. They are the new record holder of both, and we're going to have some discussions about whether Duke can or can't be a part of those most impressive races, because they're becoming one of the best teams in these videos each and every video with this new roster update. We will see you next time.